Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Mindful Session. My name is UNISA KAMARA. It's a pleasure to have you with us on this beautiful day. I had to say with me. I had to,
Yeah. Let's make the assumption that I'm not actually there because I wasn't on screen. But hey, everybody, welcome to another session. I hope you've all had a good week.
Well, I'm going to make an assumption that David is not here. Ladies and gentlemen, today's show, it's about assumptions and the impacts of assumptions. Now, as they say, every pro there's a con, every con there's a pro. There's a good, there's a bad. So we have to look at things from different perspectives, different angles. So what we're going to do today is have the whole conversation about when you assume, what do you get out of it? And what are the impacts from our assumptions, from us assuming? Because have in mind, ladies and gentlemen, every good, there's bad. And every pro, there's a con. So, David, shall we go into this? Because I'm still assuming you're not here, but I just got to talk to somebody.
I'm reminded of a story that I was told many, many years ago of a priest who, when he was told he was going to a new church, he went and had a look around the community and he saw a very affluent area, very well-meaning community, really nice church congregation, everything else. So the Sunday that he was going to give his first sermon, he went to the church before sunup, and he dressed as a vagrant and just sat in the doorway of the church, and nobody said anything to him. And the church wardens came, they opened up the church and walked past him to do that and didn't say anything. The parishioners came to church and they didn't say anything to him. They didn't engage. They didn't ask him if he was okay. They went in and they prepared for their service. And after everybody was in, the priest went and sat back at the church. So obviously the priest, as the congregation were assuming was going to be there, hadn't arrived. And the church warden and the deacons, and they're all, I'm terribly sorry, don't know what's happening. And he stood up and walked through the congregation as this vagrant, got to the front and then peeled off the wig, peeled off the coat that was full of holes, and presented himself as the assumption would say he would look as the priest, and then gave his sermon about not making assumptions based on what you see in front of you. And it's stuck with me because of how powerful that must have been, both for him as the priest to be able to understand the parishioners, but also for the parishioners to see how they'd made that assumption that this person that was sat outside looking dishevelled was not somebody that they could learn from, not somebody that they could engage with.
That is definitely something powerful. And I also heard about that story, but in actuality, what he did, the same thing you described, sat right in front of the church, begging, as a beggar, and people looking at him, driving up in their vehicles, dressed nicely, not acknowledging him. And you say you're going to church to give praise, to be this humane individual, and here is this gentleman in need of your service. You assume he's a nobody, you judge him.
And it's that moment of the assumption, that the assumption is here. But the action, the impact of that assumption that causes you to go, no, I am not helping you, I am going on my way.
The impact to me out of that story was when when everybody was sitting there waiting for this preacher, this pastor, and here comes this man that you just passed outside, walking through the aisle to the head of the church.
Yeah.
Can you imagine the thoughts that were going through their minds?
Yeah.
All the assumptions, all the craziness.
And this is something that kind of always hits on what's that impact. The moment that priest stood in front of his congregation
and revealed
that moment, and I've heard,
and his whole sermon was an assumption.
Yeah.
And he made the statement, we come here to be this holy people, to help each other. And there I was, because I was not dressed in the fabric that you guys expect of me, so you did not acknowledge me. Or the fabric that you wear, you did not acknowledge me. I thought that was quite impactful, powerful.
Now, I as a young, I think I must have been about 13, 14, when I was told that story. And
I just read it recently.
Yeah, but this is a story that gets told to reinforce it doesn't get old, it's classic. And I was told it, and it was like, yeah, okay, that's just something that gets, it's one of those fairy tale stories that gets told to kids so they understand, don't make the assumption, don't make judgments, don't judge based on what you see, but based on what someone's actions are, not on what they look like. So I was then told a live experience that someone else had had when they were younger. And the experience was they were on their way to a judo lesson. This was some point in the 60s. And on the bus, there was an old Japanese-looking man, probably in his late 60s, early 70s, who walked with a limp. And all of these teenagers were taking the mickey out of this old man and his limp. And the individual that was telling this story gets to the judo club, and it's all changed. They're all on the mat ready to have their lesson. And this old man comes out onto the mat. And because on the mat you don't have footwear, you can see that one of his feet has been crushed. And he has a physical disability. And as teenagers, you notice the things that stand out, right?
Of course.
And you make assumptions based on what stands out. So on the bus, it was, we make the assumption based on the limp, the old age, the clear use of a cane. On the mat, it's now in front of you. You can see that this individual has a physical injury. What they hadn't realised was at that time, that individual had the highest rated black belt in judo in the country.
When you assume, you make a mockery of yourself. Well, not to jump off the gun into something racial, a friend of mine was on Channel 4, and I will try to put the clip up when the show goes on. He sent me a clip. Society now has this assumption that black men are always angry. Black women have attitudes. So he has created an organization called Smile UK or something, where these 13-year-old black kids come into an environment and they get to smile and portray a different image. Now, one thing he said is, UNISA, when I was growing up, I never had this opportunity. You understand? Because the environment I was growing up in, we always had to portray this hardcore surface. You understand? And now society has come to this assumption that black kids have attitudes. They have jumped to this conclusion, this assumption.
Yeah, fake it till you make it.
Yeah, something, yeah, of a sort. But one thing he's doing is that a lot of videos he does, you see these little brown faces with these beautiful smiles. And when he did that on ITV or Channel 5, he sent me the footage. I have to bring it in. It's just beautiful because it's like some of them do look like, but when they smile, it's like you see the youth resonate out of that.
Yeah.
And society has come to the assumption that, you know, these are bad kids. And me being a youth advocate, that irritates me when I hear, I don't care if you're green, purple, whatever have you. A child is a child. We have to learn to accept them for who they are.
Yeah.
And if we keep assuming that they're bad kids, that's an impact on them.
Yeah. Because they have to survive in that world with that perception. And in order to survive in that world of that perception is a very, very hostile environment. Because you cannot be yourself. You have to perform to the presentation that's been put in front of you. And we've spoken about it on other shows around what survival mode is and how that works. We've looked at the idea of that disconnect between what we present to the world and what is truly us. And when that is pulled apart, because the world in which we live in says, this is the presentation, this is who you are because of X, Y, and Z, that someone else has actually put onto you. It's not you that has said, I'm angry. It's not you that said that I've got attitude. It's the world around you
Society
saying, well, because of my assumption, that's what you are. And that is something that the mindful session, since the very first show, has always been seeking to drive out and let people know that the private presentation is always more important than the public one. The public one is what is your survival in the world around you. It's not you.
You know,
the closer those get to being balanced, the better and the easier for you. But don't listen to other people. That's their stuff. That's their presentation. It's not you.
I grew up in Staten Island, but we resonated to Jersey, and I ended up going to school in Washington, D.C. Then I was in Boston, and then I was
going to say Borstal then.
Then I was in Atlanta. But, you know, the thing is, when people see me, especially when I get into the lift with the older white woman, they will pull back and hold their purse with the assumption that I'm going to either rob them or do them harm. But when I'm around certain white people, they all lovey-dovey with me. You understand? And it kind of sometimes confuses you as to say, okay, what's going on here? You know,
and it's those different perceptions that other people have that they then impose upon the world around them. So you getting into a lift with someone of our own generation, invariably you get less of that perception. An older generation where that fear has been honed and driven for its own purposes is harder to break.
right.
But as we grow and we break the cycle, we don't let that hatred pass down to the next generation. And that's the challenge, is not allowing the fear that others have shown to us bleed into the fear that we show our children.
You know, I've been dealing with a lot of people, especially on social media, and which indeed I always say, don't judge someone because you think they're racist. I believe in one race, David.
It's the human race.
The human race.
Yeah.
The color is irrelevant.
Yeah.
Because like I always give my prime example, I pull out a knife, I cut you, you'll feel pain. You bleed red. You pull out a knife, you cut me, I'll feel pain. I'll bleed red. One thing we all seek is love. One thing we try to avoid is loneliness. You understand?
Yeah.
So we all go through that. So one thing I'd say to people is that I don't show anger towards people that I think are racist. I don't show anger towards someone that says I don't like you because of your color or because of your bald. I always tell you I don't like you. And you never take it personal, because at the end of the day, when somebody says something, try to understand the basis of it.
Yep.
Do they mean it?
Yeah.
What's the cause of it? What's the root of it?
And this is the thing, the root of all of this always stems from fear. Fear of what we don't know, what we don't understand.
Or something that occurred.
Yeah. And when we have generational fear that is bled down, generation after generation, it ingrains itself. It's dirt that should never have been allowed on the woodwork, that has just been polished into the woodwork. And until you sand that back and take away that grime and take away the rough edges that have been allowed to grow, you're never going to be able to polish that wood back to what it should be.
True.
But in order to get that wood back, you need to put the oils in, you need to put the waxes in, you need to put nutrients back into that wood. With humans, that nutrient is just knowledge. Not the historic bias knowledge one way or the other to any situation, whether it's racial, religious, sexual orientation, whatever. You take it to knowledge. And when you allow the knowledge and the understanding to grow without bias, without an agenda, you start to be able to put those nutrients back in.
I disagree with you.
Of course.
You expect that, right?
I'm not making an assumption.
You are making an assumption. Now, you and I had a conversation about Tanya, and which indeed did a podcast with me. I always am avoiding podcasts, but now it's like,
now you can't get enough of them.
No, it's not. I can't get. It's like they will call me. Do you want to talk about humanity? And do you want to talk about the youths? And it's hard for me to say no, because anything dealing with humanity or my youths, count me in.
Yeah.
I have something to say.
Don't we know it?
Yeah, but one thing that she and I doing the podcast is we went around talking about intelligence, education, book smarts, and street smart. You understand? You can have all the knowledge, all the understanding dealing with books, but are you really smart, street smart?
Okay.
Because you can still be con.
Oh.
And you can be so street smart, you can be smarter than the book smart. But if you have those both combined, it makes you above the average.
Yeah.
Now, the reason why I brought that up is that when I was talking to this gentleman, which indeed I spoke to Tanya, Amalia, all of them about, it's the fact that he's so intelligent and he has so much anger. He calls the other race concubines. I don't understand what they have done to the African heritage, the Egyptians, and he was taking me back. And this is all on social media, ladies. If you go to UNISA's Facebook, you will read this comment.
And gentlemen.
You can see the anger. And one thing I try to portray to him, understand the basis of their anger. Understand what they have gone through. Understand why they have so much anger. If you can do the understanding of it, you can try to educate them. You can try to support them. And his response is, how can I educate them? Whenever we try to educate them, they manipulate us and abuse us again. So how do you deal with someone like that with so much anger, because you cannot assume that they hate a certain race. It's just the anger. And the impact that it's having on him, I can imagine his children.
Dealing with most scenarios, go past the presentation. The presentation is the anger. Okay? The root invariably is misunderstanding, misknowledge, fear. And when you unpack, okay, what is your knowledge about this situation? Is your knowledge of the situation accurate? Then you can start to question what that situation has led to that anger. But if you can unpack the building blocks, the anger drops, because the knowledge of those building blocks goes up. And when we look at fear as the primary cause of these people scare me, these people...
That's legitimate.
And this is where fear is like the blood to anger. You know, it's what fuels
or anger. When you say fear, you have to be more specific. Now, I did a little research on him, as I've just shown you his name and his picture, and I told Tanya about him as well. Tanya said, wow, I know this man. He did a talk at one of our events. You understand? So after she gave me a little bit of background on him, I kind of understood.
But also, bear in mind, the narrative that has been portrayed in manipulating and cultivating those angers for generations. When we drive past that start point, most people will say, I'm angry because of this situation, and it will feed back to a point in time, either recently or not so recent. But what was going on at that point in time? What was the environment like? Because invariably it's not the same as it is now. So when this fear was spawned, what was the situation? And when you start to understand those scenarios, you start to break down some of the narrative that came out. You start to break down some of the manipulations that have been put in play to keep somebody angry. Take the industrialization of human resources, the slave trade. The slave trade did not start in the 1600s with Europeans arriving in the African continent. The slave trade goes back millennia. Why are we not angry about the Mesopotamians? Why are we not angry at the Welsh being taken off of the beaches by Irish pirates during the Roman Empire? Why are we not...
David, you need to understand. Growing up in America, we were not taught too much about our black history.
Okay.
We had a month of Black History Month.
Okay.
This is not a racial show, ladies and gentlemen. Now,
let's look at the knowledge. The knowledge, therefore, is flawed.
Music in one of the biggest stores in America. That is absurd.
Yeah.
You will never go to Macy's, Lord and Taylor, Nordstrom, and hear Afrobeat music.
So the knowledge that has been brought into the consciousness is not accurate, is it? The knowledge that is then used to garnish and maintain a cultural balance or a social balance is not accurate. Because American history did not start with Columbus arriving on the shore.
No.
Okay? We know that Columbus didn't discover America. We know that story has been blown away, but is that what is taught?
But here you go. You come into my land, you take over my land, and then you say we have Thanksgiving. Do you get it?
When we
It's
look
not bad
right,
adding up.
so when we look at the evolution of what is now modern Americas, yeah. When was Native American celebrations? We have a European or a Europeanized culture developed by people that left Europe for a very particular reason. The pilgrims that formed what we understand as modern America were people that were unable to practice their religious beliefs within what was at the time the religious doctrine of the Catholic Church. And they were told, if you want to practice that, that's fine, but not here.
It was not say that's fine. Let's be
It's not
honest.
here.
Yeah.
Right?
Not fine.
Right?
You're not
but
allowed.
you're not going to do it here.
Precisely.
Right?
So
you have,
it was fine.
right. So you have a group of people with a particular religious zealot approach, an extreme religious doctrine, looking for a new place to be. And they found it. And that formed everything that comes out from that.
Right.
So when you have a culture that says, do you know what, we're going to expand, but the people that are here, no, we don't want that. We don't understand their way of thinking, their way of living, their cultural experience, their connectivity with the land. So we'll move them out the way. What are we discovering now, more so in America than probably anywhere else, about the importance of the way the Native Americans lived? Is that they had it right. Their balance with the planet was more supportive to existence than ours.
Of course, they
So when-
connected with nature.
Right.
And which you need, if one was ill, they're not going to a pharmaceutical.
No, they're going to Mother Earth.
They go to Mother Earth.
Right.
But thank you.
Right.
But you know what, David? All this is good and dandy. We can sit here and we talk about how society is judging black people. There'll be white people saying society is judging them. There'll be Spanish people saying they've been judged. You understand?
It's all assumptions. Because we're looking...
One assumption is another's realization, another's fact.
Right, there's a difference. That's the change. Assumption is here. What we do with that assumption causes the impact.
Thank you. That's what I was going to say.
I took the words out of your mouth. I'm good at this. We're getting good. But it's true. The idea that to assume is to make a you and me.
A mule. Let's say the mule.
A mule,
a donkey.
a you and
a
me.
Donkey.
Okay, we break up the word.
Yeah.
Okay, but that's if it stays in our head, right? If we act on that assumption, then we end up creating the myth that is what we believe to be true. An assumption is never a truth.
That's it.
Assumption can never be a truth because we don't have the knowledge in order for that assumption to be fact.
One thing I can say, ladies and gentlemen, David dealt with a lot of adults. I am a youth person. One thing
I reckon half the time you get more of the grown-up than I do sometimes.
One thing I can say is that don't assume anything about your children. Give them the opportunity to be who they are. Sometimes we're not always going to agree with what it is that they're going to convey or tell us. But we have to learn that they have to live their life. And we're here to support them. And I was very hard. One time, just something, my daughter came and was like, well, I want to talk to you.
Oh.
Yeah, like, what is this about? And when I say, it was like, a surprise, like, you understand. But one thing I had to do was find it in me to be able to talk to her and be honest with her. She did not appreciate it, but we found a common ground. And the essence of it is that we learned from each other.
Mm-hmm. And that's the thing, is I think certainly in what the world would call Western cultures, we've got to this idea for the last 250 years that a child has to be at a set point, at a set time, irrelevant of their own experience, their own understandings. And no child should be treated like the ingredients in a sausage machine. Mm-hmm. Our education system does not start at X point and end at this point, and if you haven't achieved the required standard at this point, life is over. The majority of the most successful people in the planet do not get to the end of that sausage machine.
Right.
They come out of it long before. So we have to understand that our children have to be allowed to grow and learn at their pace. The artificial timeline of education systems that penalise a child if they are not at a certain point at a certain time because that's when the system says so, is what is creating some of the biggest challenges for young people.
Impacts. Those are called impact. Let's call a spade a spade. When we assume or we take them out of their element, that impacts them into so many different aspects.
Yes.
And also, ladies and gentlemen, have in mind, action, reaction. When it impacts them, they can react in different ways. Think about putting a rat in a corner. That rat will do whatever it takes to get out.
Yeah. Einstein's theory of education. If you judge every animal by its ability to climb a tree, every fish will fail.
Exactly.
And I was told every day near enough when I was at school, I would never write more than 4 sides of A4 paper. I was undiagnosed as dyslexic, I was thick, I was this. All of these excuses that were put in to say I wasn't going to be able to do. Well, I'm a published author. Twice.
Well done.
You've seen the sheer volume of work that comes out. You tell me that that education system was right by saying no more than 4 sides of A4 paper from this young man, thank you very much. Not going to happen. But it was only allowed not to happen because I wasn't allowed the impact of what a broken system was telling me. I wasn't allowed to fall into the education system must be right, because I am an individual. My parents understood that, and my support team around me as I grew understood that. And that says more about the education system being flawed than it does about anything else. We have to break the assumptions that are given to us and allow our own impacts from our learning at our pace, at our time, not what someone else tells us.
I'm so sorry, David, that you had to go through that. But, back in our time, you understand, the proper diagnosis were not given. A lot of assumptions were made because those are assumptions. And they could have impacted you in a negative way. Could have said, you know what? This is what the educational system said. So if they saying it, I must be it.
They must be right. They're the professionals. So give up. Just do what the system tells you.
Expect of me.
And that's the challenge when any child is up against that kind of assumption. And the impact that can have is devastating.
It's immense, of course.
Absolutely devastating.
One thing I can say to you, ladies and gentlemen, me as well, growing up, a lot of people thought I was not going to be here today. I'll either be in jail or dead. Those are my two options: jail or dead. Not, oh, he can change. Not, no. He's either going to be in jail or dead. Status quo. You can be whatever you want. It's never easy doing when you're going through your challenges. Now, I'm talking to the youths. You will face a lot of obstacles. That's not making you weak. A lot of people are going to make a lot of assumptions about you. Know who you are and know that there's a better you in within.
Every hurdle is making you stronger.
Don't let someone's assumptions impact you.
Every hurdle is making you stronger.
Precisely. David has gone through a lot, from breaking his body bones. And so look at him now.
Yo,
an alpha.
The world.
Can't read.
I can read.
Well, you couldn't read. He couldn't write.
I couldn't write.
The education system said you could not do it.
Yeah.
So you went against the odds.
I was kicked out of more lessons because I learned more than what was being taught in the lesson outside of school. Because I didn't believe, and I wasn't allowed to believe, what I was being told was going to define who I was. By the time I was able to say, right, this is what I'm going to do with my life, I'd got that experience, I'd got that understanding, I'd gone out and got the knowledge. I didn't buy the bite-sized education knowledge that the majority of the world is given. And that, I think, is probably where, like you say, the education that you are given, the knowledge that you are spoon-fed, is spoon-fed for a reason. And when you break that, when you eat from a different menu, you start to get different protein.
Of course. I always talk about my two sons, the twins. ADHD. The school system said they had ADHD. And I'll always talk about them because I'm so proud. Keith and Kyle, you look them up on Facebook. They're doing so good in college. They're on honor roll. They're very athletic. You understand?
But I didn't get that bit from you. I promised I would give him a chance to show the guns. So
there we go.
There we go.
Yeah. But anyway, if you see how they've excelled, and the educational system wanted to start putting drugs in their system, saying that they cannot sit still. They're very intelligent. ADHD. What is ADHD? They were learning faster than other kids. The teachers were not able to keep up with them.
Yeah.
So they needed to find something to slow them down.
Yeah. And this is
and I refused.
And this is the challenge for every parent, is finding the balance of their child's learning at the pace, whether that is faster or slower, is irrelevant. It's about finding the pace for the child, the individual, and finding the things that spark for that individual.
Exactly.
We have, literally in the studio today, we both have access to the best education system in the world. We have access to the knowledge that is available. Now, yes, you have to filter it. Yes, you have to kind of go, is this real knowledge? Is this the genuine stuff? But we have access to the biggest library ever. The internet is that library. If you don't think the education system that you are getting is giving you the right skills for what you need to learn, it's in your pocket. Go get that education. Go find those skill sets. There is distance learning is, for me, the solution to the current education crisis, because then a child can go at 13, 14, I want to learn Swahili in the middle of downtown New York. Is any school in downtown New York going to have a Swahili system to educate?
Seriously?
Hell no. But Distance learning allows it to happen. And we have to empower our young people to use the tools of the world in which they live, not the world in which the Victorians decided this is how we educate, through sausage machine systems.
Ladies and gentlemen, the show is not positive and negatives.
Just to avoid any confusion, today it's about assumptions and
impacts. So, just to say, we're human beings. I do understand. Well, we're human. This is a human race, and we are going to make assumptions. You understand? But careful. Be very cautious on how you portray your assumptions, because if you tell a child you're dumb, again, I have to go onto my youths, Dave. I do apologize, because my whole mind, because me seeing a child suffer, basically something that, when you call a child dumb, when you say a child is stupid, when you call a child out of their name, there's an impact. When you don't want to talk to your child, every minute you are busy, you don't have that interaction, there is an impact. We as adults, let's put ourselves in that 10-year-old or that 13-year-old or that 15-year-old child. How would we feel if we were being treated in that way? Or say you were treated in that manner. How did you feel?
And bear in mind, most children of any age don't have the capacity to process and verbalize what it is that you understand. They're trying to communicate without some of the skills that you've already developed, because you've grown, you've experienced. They haven't yet. So we have to be mindful. The speed at which a child learns, grows, processes and actions is not going to be the same as that of an adult. I'll give you an example. We've all heard of how the percentage of communication is body language and words and tone and volume and all of that, right? And it's all broken down, and body language plays a big part, right? That's true in adults who have already been through their growing cycles.
Been through the process.
Okay?
Correct.
A child who hasn't been through that process.
Remember the growing process? We spoke about that.
Right? Child that's hasn't gone through that. All of those percentages, they don't matter. They're non-existent. So if you're going to judge a child because they sit there listening to you like that, because they've got defensive, they've got this, they're giving off this body language, you're misreading what they're saying. No, because this is just comfortable.
Yeah, but also,
because I can relax and I can open up and I can hear what you're saying. But because if an adult makes the perception, they make the assumption that that child isn't listening because they got their arms folded, but you stop listening to what your child tells you.
Well, you in the psych field, we do understand. That's why when you say isolation, you understand defense mechanism. If I'm talking to my child, my first question will be, "Are you alright? What's wrong?" You understand? Why are you?
Because you're not making the assumption that it's one thing or the other, and that's the point.
You have to converse with the child.
Yeah, understand what that is. Do not make the assumption because we've all heard that presentation means X. No, in children, forget it. Doesn't work that way. And if you make the assumption, the impact that you will have is drive your child further and further away, and they won't speak to you, they won't come to you, they won't engage with you, and then you'll go, well, they're not talking to me, but I'm trying. And they're going, but you're not listening. And if you're not listening, why am I going to talk? So whatever the situation is, however hard a situation might be, question yourself about the assumptions you are making about what's presented in front of you.
Okay. Well, ladies and gentlemen, as we come into the end of the show, I just want to just bring out a quick story. Then, my father, had his own chair where we were not allowed to sit. And the funny
Sit in it and we'll plug it in.
yeah, he had the lazy boy and everything. But when he's not home, we are the king. But when he comes home, he had his chair. And we know, like, our dad is not the talkative type. But when there is an issue, he would observe you, and he's the type to say, come talk to me. And during that process, you're welcome. My dad never cared if he's sleeping, if there's something bothering you, welcome. Come talk to me. I don't want you to go talk to a stranger out there or somebody else. I'm here to support you. We as parents, our job is to support our children. Our job is to guide them. We are not right and we're not perfect, you understand? But we do our best. So that is all I have to say. David, as we come to an end, anything you want to say as we close?
Have a great week. Stay safe. And please, look after yourselves and each other.
We thank you all for watching. Have a blessed weekend, and may God be with you. And take care of your children. Listen to them. I had to put that in there. I love my youths. Good night, ladies and gentlemen.